I've run across a number of portable stereos, but some of my favorites combine audio cassette playback with a black and white TV. I'm the Soundtracker, and this is a Sony FD555 Mega Watchman. Combo units like this aren't really anything new, but I am surprised how many of them exist that, for me at least, just flew under the radar. One I went over a little while ago has a TV combined with a CD player. I have another in my collection that's a combo TV/alarm clock, and I've run across a lot of various models that have a cassette player bolted to a TV. Whenever I see a portable stereo like that, they always cause me to do a double take because I'm not expecting a TV as part of the overall functionality, especially not one with a black and white picture tube. These kinds of boomboxes are surprisingly common, and if you like to collect retro AV gear, are still very fun to use if they're working. On this model of Watchman, the controls are very simply laid out. The selector for the main functions, tape, radio, and TV, are paired with the frequency selection switches for the radio or the TV just beneath the tape player's transport controls. To the left of that, we have audio controls for volume, tone, and surround, and on the right we have a tuning knob which controls the frequency that the boombox is receiving. AM, FM, VHF, or UHF. The back of the unit has a few things to look at as well. On one side we have a vertical hold and a contrast knob for the TV, and on the other side the unit's built-in antenna and an external antenna jack. That one is for use only with television reception, but we'll get into that in a bit. Last but not least, on the bottom we have a battery compartment for 8 D-cell batteries. Adds to the weight but makes it far more portable. This thing is very pleasant to look at and very easy to use. Everything you want to do with the boombox, whether it's TV, radio, or tape, is governed by the function selector. Starting with the tape function, that also doubles as the off switch for certain boomboxes with piano key transports like this one. The presence of off with brackets around the tape there implies the unit might be plugged in and receiving power, but nothing will happen until you either switch functions to something else or interact with the tape deck. And speaking of which, here's a quick sample of that before I move on. That sample came directly from the unit's headphone jack into my capture equipment, and it sounds pretty good as far as boombox tape decks go. Sound characteristics can also be altered by the tone knob, which is the difference between bass and treble, and by the surround button, which gives more of a pseudo-surround effect. The manual doesn't go into much detail on what's happening, but I have a feeling it's just applying some form of phasing or equalization to stereo channels. The intention there would be to alter or boost certain frequencies and give a virtual surround effect to stereo soundtracks. It's especially effective for tapes since the audio from the playback head is in stereo. I do seem to remember this sort of surround effect setting popping up once in a while from around about the late 90s to the early 2000s. It's not anything as fancy as Dolby Surround, but it's still a neat optional effect to have. The tape player offers one last convenience feature, and that is the ability to auto-stop, whether it's play, fast-forward, or rewind, and while that is absolutely ubiquitous for most tape decks of the time, it's still something I really appreciate. Calling something like auto-stop a convenience feature is a bit odd because it's so common, but I've run into a couple of tape decks that just don't do that. Some that have it advertise it, some that have it don't advertise it, and some don't have it at all, so for me at least, I like to know that it's there when it's not advertised on the deck because I like having the option. Anyway, that's about it for tapes. There's no record, no Dolby noise reduction, no tape type selection. All this boombox does is play tapes, and it does a pretty decent job of that. It doesn't really need to do more in any case because the point of this boombox is affordable portable entertainment, not recording, so while the cassette deck is minimalistic, it's not really a drawback. Anyway, speaking of entertainment, on to the next function, the radio. With the radio active, you can choose between AM or FM stereo from this band selector here and use the tuning dial to find a local broadcast. This takes a little bit of finessing sometimes depending on where you are. I've had a few occasions with different radios where I've had to sproing, boing, push, pat, pull, adjust, maladjust, readjust to find a signal that doesn't introduce static. My usual method of getting around this would be to move from FM stereo back to FM mono and be done with it, because doing so can make reception of a clean signal a little easier, even if the resultant broadcast is in mono. On this occasion, that's impossible because this radio only caters to FM stereo. I do think that's a bit of an odd choice, but FM mono was probably cut for cost reasons if I had to guess. I mean, this TV probably wasn't cheap to implement and most likely meant reducing features in the radio and the cassette deck. Generally speaking, I prefer to have the option of FM mono, but I understand why it might not be present. That being said, when you manage to dial in a station, it works pretty well. Yep, stereo sounds fantastic when it's dialed in, so out of curiosity I tried the AM receiver, which is a bit more of a mixed bag. AM reception in the Watchman is tethered to an internal AM loop antenna, and it's suggested in the manual that moving the unit physically will affect reception. This ultimately became an exercise in futility, and I suspect that where I live, AM just doesn't receive well in most cases. What I can confirm is that it definitely feels weird listening to a radio that gets turned sideways to you or has its back to you with its arms crossed just to improve reception slightly. I've tried a few other radios just to see what would happen, including this vacuum tube radio, which, side note, I'm very happy still works, but whether it's geography, needing a better antenna, or perhaps even an issue with the unit, I'm just not really able to pull a clean signal yet. If you have any tips on reception, please let me know in the comments, because I'd love to explore AM and FM in more detail, and with my current situation I can't really do it the justice it deserves. In any case, the radio overall seems to work, and pairs pretty well with the sleep switch. This sets an internal timer which will shut off the radio automatically after roughly an hour of use. As someone who likes to fall asleep to music, that is a really nice feature to have. Alrighty, so we have a solid tape deck combined with a decent radio. Now let's take a look at the TV. The picture tube in this unit is a 5-inch black and white CRT, which I think was chosen for several reasons. Adding circuitry to process and show color images would have impacted battery life, made the unit overall more expensive, and black and white sets are compatible with color television signals. Very, very simply put, that compatibility is achieved by use of a signal that has all of the necessary information to make a full black and white or color picture, but the color portion is stored in an area that the black and white set can ignore because it's not necessary on those TV sets. The rest of the information, brightness, timing, sound, etc., is still used. So, one kind of signal for two types of TVs broadcast over many analog frequency channels. The sliders that control reception shift from VHF channels 2 through 13 and UHF channels 14 through 69. Analog broadcasts have been shut down in my area for some time, but many portable TVs take advantage of a 3.5mm mono male-ended to Type F coaxial female-ended adapter, which fits snugly into the external antenna jack. The manual suggests this could be used for several different kinds of antennas, or for viewing camcorder tapes if you were on the go and needed a portable TV. However, it's just as easy to connect any RF source. VHS, Laserdisc, game consoles, as long as it has an RF output or can convert to one, you're in for a good time, but first a little more setup. If the picture is rolling like you see here, adjust the vertical hold knob a little bit and it should sort itself out. The other picture adjustment is contrast, and that affects the balance between black and white on screen. With that said, let's see how gaming goes on this TV. In Metroid Prime, I'm currently in the observatory in Phendrana Drifts, and I had to do some signal fudging to make this work. Right now the GameCube is actually running S-Video to a VCR, and that is sending S-Video to the capture card and RF to the TV, but so far so good. I mean, we can make out good color and detail in the image, but what's really striking to me here is that with the introduction of color, the observatory is also surprisingly dark in comparison to a TV set without color. Just to make sure I didn't have a screw loose about it, I decided to remove the color from the captured footage, and while the image is still visible, there is quite a difference in contrast ratio that I wasn't expecting. A lot of the area presenting as too dark to see in captured footage is really easily visible in the CRT. I don't know, maybe a setting could be tweaked on my capture card or my video camera, maybe the cable work needs investigating, but I do remember CRT TVs just being inherently brighter in dark places. There could also be setting differences on CRTs back in the day that I'm not able to take into account right now. That came up a couple of times with my friends and family when they were upgrading from CRTs to LCD TVs back in the day, and it's probably because CRTs boil down to a really complicated version of a light bulb. In any case, on a CRT, it's easy to see things like outlines and textures on the wall, and that makes navigating this room a breeze. In color, there's a blue stripe outlining the platform so you can have a go at where they are, but in black and white, the contrast still allows the full shape of the platform to be visible, and that still makes for an easy time finding your way around. Where black and white works with navigation, it's a hindrance to things that require color, and that's part of why I chose this game. On the map legend to the left of the screen, different beam types have different color codes to signify which beam opens what door. In grayscale, they're harder to tell apart, and that will cause problems over time. For right now, this door can only be opened with the wave beam, and identifying it by sight is much easier with color, cause that's the purple one. Later in the game, some of the space pirates are also color-coded, and running random chance on that while fighting an enemy would be a real pain. Point is, if the game didn't require color, it would be more than playable on this set. I've skipped ahead a bit in the footage, but I haven't changed any of the settings, and doing battle with space pirates is still fun as hell on a black and white set. I'm also just glad the contrast in brightly lit areas balances out well with the contrast in dimly lit areas on the CRT. Before, I could make out some of the darker areas a little easier, but that has not now created an overly bright outdoor area on screen, which is great. Just for the hell of it, this is that same removal of color from before, and with this being a brighter area, there is naturally better visibility, but I'm going to have to investigate further on why low light areas are so much darker overall. It just doesn't seem to me that turning up the brightness is the solution, because bright areas in capture are fine, and if I did that, that may overblow the image with light. That being said, there are now a bunch of questions that have been raised for me that I don't have time to answer right now, like how different would this be if I used a color CRT? Why is the difference between light and dark so much broader in capture? Maybe a different capture card would yield a different result. Since there are more questions than answers at this point, if you can think of something I may not have spotted or know of another way of testing that I can take a look at, please let me know in the comments. So video games are a bit of a mixed bag depending on how necessary color in the game is, but for regular viewing of movies or television programs, which was the original intent of this device, black and white is an interesting change of perspective. It allows you to experience and think about the program you're watching a little differently, and watching color programs on a black and white set doesn't really take away from the entertainment value for me. I think that was also the case for most people when this thing was new. If you were looking for portable entertainment back then, having a tape deck that only plays, or a TV that only displays in black and white, was a perfectly adequate trade-off for portability because you really only need something that performs the task. And the Watchman does just that. It's a very simple device with very useful features, and overall I love the design of this thing. It's very Sony's future of the 90s, which is fitting because that's when this was made. I grew up with CRTs being omnipresent, and televisions like these are getting on in years now, but there's still a lot to appreciate about them. I'm looking forward to exploring that and talking a bit more about analog technology as a whole, so if you like these videos, you know what to do.